Fabulous. Okay. So, hi everyone. Welcome to the first episode of Bay Street Capital Holdings podcast titled How Did You Do It and Why Should I Care? This series aims to highlight women doing amazing work in various industries. And today we are so lucky to be joined by Dr. Kate Dowling, who is founder and CEO of Sustainable Self. So, Dr. Dowling, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for having me. I'm honored to be here. Um, my name is Dr. Katelyn Dowling, or Kate, and I started my business, which broadly operates in the coaching and consulting space around sustainability issues, back in 2019. And our mission is to create greater harmony between human, natural, and technological systems.
Wow, that sounds amazing. So I guess the question is, how did you do it and why should I care?
Well, that's a pretty big question.
Yes, I think we'll start off with sort of what inspired you to join this industry?
Sure. So back when I was in college, when I was in your shoes, I was studying international relations at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. And at that time in my developmental path, I was really passionate about learning and understanding um, environmental issues that we're facing as a human civilization. And largely at that time, again, one of the things that I coach people on is something that I developed called the sustainable self model. And a fundamental assumption of this model is that space-time itself is the central organizing feature that drives evolution, right? So when I talk about myself back in college, it's because I'm illustrating the point that our individual development, as well as our um, family or community or city or national or even species development, uh, happens in relationship to time and space, right?
Mhm.
So it was 2009 when I graduated, and there was a huge economic recession
Yeah.
occurring at that time. So there were really no jobs available for someone with a BA in international studies. Um, Certainly, a lot of big companies were on hiring freezes or simply, you know, there were limited spaces available for people fresh out of college, right? This is the the challenge facing a lot of millennials is that it's a 1-2 punch. Right now we're dealing with the global pandemic, but so at that time I went into advertising because it was the only job I could get, and I was very grateful for the job, but I was working for a huge narcissist who was only interested in making money and working with affluent luxury lifestyle brands.
Mhm.
And, I asked myself, I said, what am I doing here? How is this fulfilling my soul? What needs are being met? What needs are not being met? And, I had one of these come to Jesus moments in my early 20s where I was like, you need to change course, right? So I went back to school and I got my doctorate in clinical and community psychology. And while I was there, I did my doctoral research on emotions and global environmental problems because I was perplexed. I was like, why is it that we've known about these problems for over 100 years, and yet we haven't done anything about it collectively? What is the challenge that we face as a human civilization in addressing these systemic, interrelated challenges that we face? And that could be, the ecological collapse of species across the planet. It could be climate change, which is, largely driven by economic activity, and greenhouse gases being emitted into the atmosphere. What is it about these existential threats that cause us to basically freeze, right?
Mhm.
And why is inaction, happening? Why is the absence of action happening, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so I got curious. I got curious about my own experience. I got curious about the experience of others. And I conducted a whole lot of interviews with people of a variety of different backgrounds
Mhm.
to try and better understand the emotional experience of what this was like and what really is going on here.
Yeah.
Um, and so all of that led me to understand more deeply that there really is actually a lot of emotional repair and
Yeah.
healing that must happen simultaneously to our movement forward towards a more green economy,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
um, we can't continue to operate on the assumption that we ourselves, our psycho-spiritual development, is somehow separate
Yeah.
from the larger planetary challenges we're facing. And so that really was the inspiration for starting Sustainable Self,
Yeah.
um, and really kind of drives the work that I do um, on a daily basis. Yeah, having those conversations with people.
Yeah, it's always a help that you're passionate about what you do and you really feel a connection to your work. So that's great that you're enjoying it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
And the truth is it's a little oh, it's hard
mm,
because it's natural. I mean, I even notice of a lot of people, maybe even you, have a hard time talking about this subject.
yeah.
Because it's really scary. It's profoundly scary, especially for young women,
Mhm.
right? Many of us grow up imagining what it will be like one day to have a family and to raise children and to, in addition to our professional career development. And, there's genuine fear that doing that making that choice for ourselves and our families will be, not safe in the near term. I mean, look at what's happening in Texas right now as we speak. There's entire populations of people who are freezing to death because infrastructure was not um, improved and weatherized in that area in anticipation of what we all know is coming, which is, more severe and extreme weather patterns. Um, and yeah.
No, I would completely agree. These are such big problems, but the trickle down effect you definitely also have to think about. Obviously the big problem is global warming, but we've got to see how it manifests itself in smaller, more, urgent matters.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I guess my next question would be, you mentioned that you went back to school to get your doctorate, but are there any other resources that helped you along the way?
Mentorship. Mentorship has been profoundly impactful in my life and my career journey. Um, one of the things that a mentor of mine says and wrote about recently in her book, her name is Shelley Archambault. She wrote a book called Unapologetically Ambitious. And, she says it's incredibly important to seek out mentors in your career development, especially as women, but even more so as a woman of color. I myself am a white woman, but as more and more women from a variety of ethnic and racial backgrounds enter into the workplace and are wanting to take on leadership roles, it's incredibly important to seek support from mentors in your network. And if you don't have anybody, reach out to them and say, you know, start treating them like they're your mentor.
Honestly, I would agree.
Yeah, and then they will.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think anybody is willing to help if you just reach out to them and, ask.
Most people are.
Yeah. So are there any lessons that you wish you learned before starting in your industry?
Well, I guess the one thing that I will say is It's not so much a lesson that I wish I would have learned before starting, but it's a lesson that I'm continuing to learn,
Mhm.
and one that I talk a lot about in my work with individuals and with organizations, which is the other metric that isn't talked about with regards to climate change and addressing these big ecological problems we face. And that is something called heart-brain coherence.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of this?
I haven't actually.
Cool. Awesome. I
Please
get
do
to explain
expand,
it.
explore. Yeah.
So heart-brain coherence is basically it's a state, right? So it's a state that results from certain techniques, certain breathing techniques. A lot of people equate it to meditation, but really the main difference is that it focuses on actively generating positive emotions
Yeah.
and visualizing through imagination the heart as the driver of your body's innate wisdom, right? So breathing in through your heart, in through your nose, and visualizing a space in your heart. You're welcome to try this if you'd like. Taking a deep breath, exhaling, and allowing all of that energy that you would typically carry in your mind to drop down into your heart center.
Wow. I
And
definitely felt that there.
yeah. So when you do this and when you practice this, you shift into what's called a state of coherence.
Mm,
And coherence, most plainly stated, is when your heart and your brain sync up
mm,
and your brain waves enter into what's called an alpha wave state.
mhm.
So your brain shifts from beta, which is our standard status quo place,
Yeah.
to alpha waves, which is associated with higher levels of creativity, intuition, um, productivity, uh, inner peace, all of these wonderful, beautiful things, right? Your body relaxes, your mind relaxes, and you're able to show up more fully for what's in front of you in that given moment. And the like secret little um, fact that I love to share with people is that when you are in this state of coherence, your electromagnetic field that is generated from your heart resonates at the same exact frequency as the planet.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. So when people, especially people who are, consider themselves really serious logic, problem solving, people, which is, we need that right now. We need a lot of that right now to
Yeah.
solve a lot of really difficult issues that we're facing.
Mm,
But if those people could solve their problems from a state of coherence, um, I have an inclination that things might uh, be a lot easier for everybody.
for sure. I mean, I consider myself the most logical person because I am a computer science major, I'm very like quantitative numbers driven, but I definitely felt something there. And it's good to be in touch with your feelings and really what you're feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a tendency to think of the brain as the only intelligent center in the body, but there's a reason why world traditions have called the heart the heart's wisdom, right, or the wisdom of your heart. I've talked about that for centuries.
That's so interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Of course.
So my next question would be, what would you say is your biggest failure and what did you learn from it?
Mm. Well, I've had a lot of failures in my life. Um, Actually, I would say my biggest failure, I don't know. It's hard for me to call them failures even, to be honest, because they're just so commonplace. I mean, often you shoot for the stars, and you fall flat on your ass. Like, I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I've tried to win a contract or a pitch or something, and it doesn't work out 95% of the time. Um, Especially for women who want to be entrepreneurs, you have to get comfortable with failure, and transmute it inside of yourself into an opportunity for growth. Because, honestly, in my book, there is no such thing as failure. It's just the universe's way of telling you that is not for you, and to try again or try something new.
I really like that. I think that's a really positive way to think about failure. And it's so easy to just get caught up in failure and think, oh, well, this is the end, but you've got to see it as a learning opportunity.
Yeah. I've failed a lot of tests.
Especially in college, I can definitely relate.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's a big deal at the time, but you'll get through it.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. So what's one common myth about your profession that you would like to debunk? Now you have the chance, the stage is yours.
Oh boy. Um, well, I would say a lot of business people think psychologists are really just about sorry, I'm getting a phone call from my dad. Um, Lucky me. A lot of people in business think that psychologists are that the knowledge gained from clinical psychology doesn't apply to organizational settings, right? It's sometimes, obviously, I'm not working as a psychologist right now. I'm a consultant and a coach,
Yeah.
but that's my background. That's where I earned my stripes. And so I have to debunk a lot of the whole, oh, you're analyzing me assumptions
Yeah.
about the work I used to do. And so for me it's interesting because yes, the answer is yes, I am analyzing you. And if that's threatening, then maybe we're not supposed to be working together, because the reason people hire me is so that I can take the knowledge, education, and experience I have from that background and help you become better at what you do.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So now moving on to some more questions about sort of what you do on a day-to-day basis. Have you listened to anything or read anything recently that's really inspired you?
Sure. Yeah, I just picked up Bill Gates's new book,
Oh.
um, which is How to Avoid a Climate Disaster.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really excited about diving deeper into that. Bill Gates is obviously a brilliant human being who built a multi-billion-dollar tech company.
Yeah.
I myself was born and raised in Silicon Valley, so I remember, the fury that was, Microsoft in the late 90s and early 2000s.
Yes.
Uh, and so I'm excited to dive more into it. You know, I again kind of my bias, right? And the assumption that I have about this work, having looked at climate change from a different angle than most climate scientists, is that there's an absence of emotional processing work that's actually, I think, a huge impediment to our progress in addressing some of these larger global goals. He talks about how the only two metrics we need to be concerned about right now are 51 billion and zero. Um, Apparently, it's something like 51 billion um, tons. Let me get this. Let me get this correct. 51 billion tons of CO2 in the atmosphere that's emitted on a annually needs to get down to zero by 2050.
A big
So
part.
when you really allow that the magnitude of just that one statistic to land in your heart,
Yeah.
It's hard not to cry,
Yeah.
to be honest,
Yeah.
because it's really scary.
Yeah.
I can't understate how scary it is right now, what we're doing to this planet, the
Mm.
rate of change, um, the rate of species extinction. You know, if all of the Arctic ice melted, the sea level would rise 100 feet. Imagine all of the people that we're going to have to relocate,
Mm.
the physical infrastructure that we're going to have to move in the next 20 years. It's mind boggling. It's
Yeah.
fucking crazy.
Yeah. It's a
So,
tool for sure. It's a tool.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, in order for us to be successful as a species at this critical bifurcation point in our evolution,
Yeah.
we have to um, feel this. We have to really feel it in our heart and in our soul, because if we don't, we won't achieve it.
Yeah, that's so, so important. Yeah. And you also mentioned that you had mentorship in your life. I was wondering whether you could touch upon sort of the three people who've been the most influential to you.
Sure. Dr. Theodore Burns. He was my dissertation chair, and he's just one of those brilliant, brilliant people with just such a heart of gold. He works at Antioch University. Theo Burns. Nancy Padot. Nancy Padot is a mentor of mine. She was the CEO of Party City for a number of years, and she now has this fabulous luxury fashion line and lives in Paris. And
Wow.
she does all of these wonderful things with her time that I think her business is called Salon Septime.
Definitely check that
Um,
out.
right. I know. I need a new cashmere sweater. And then I would say the other biggest influence um, for me has been a woman named Joanna Macy. And I've spoken with her once on the phone, and it was a really big deal for me. But she is the author of a number of books. She's a world-renowned Buddhist scholar, and she writes about something called the work that reconnects, which is very much one of the driving factors in my work these days. So those three people.
That's so lovely. And I guess we're wrapping up now. So my last question for you would be, what's one piece of advice you would give to your younger self? As a girl looking into the big world, what would you say?
Breathe. Time is magic.
That's so beautiful, so poignant, and it's so few words. I love it. I love it. That's so nice. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Kate Dowling. It was absolutely fantastic to speak to you. And I think after this call, I definitely agree. I understand how you did it, and I understand why I should care. So thank you.
Wonderful. Pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.